Hello everyone, I hope you're having a good day. First of all, I'd like to apologize for wearing a hat right now. I think my hair's just turned the point of no return. So in order to keep a little bit of credibility, I think it's better for me to keep this cap. This week, instead of doing our regular stats on our blog, I just wanted to take some time and speak to you freely about the perspective and the changes that this pandemic is bringing to our industry. So before I go on, let's give you a little bit of update on our current data. So I think it's safe to say that we're almost back to normal. Right now, the traffic is not quite back to where it was back in early March, but with 80% of the traffic being consistent for over a week, understanding that there's over 50% of reduction in paid traffic for April. We look at organic traffic and it's at least at 100% on a constant basis. So the drop in traffic in Canada is mostly or solely caused by the massive advertising cuts. We had about 60% reduction in our global investment in April, and that's typically why we cannot quite hit the same number that we had pre-pandemic. Having said that, we don't see the typical surge that is usually accompanying springtime, but it's positive globally speaking. Another good sign is the fact that right now, constantly the conversion rate is overperforming the traffic. It shows that visitors are in buying mode, and it's great for our dealerships who deeply need more traffic and more good buyers, more good leads in order to convert them and help bring sales back up. When we talk about walk-ins, they're still next to zero, and I believe it's normal considering the fact that we're still in confinement, still working from home. This week, having said that, we see that the government are starting to implement some plan in order to let companies reopen. Let's reopen. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing some walk-ins back in store. Online sales are increasing at a rapid pace. Chat leads are through the roof. They've been growing since the beginning of the pandemic. And in the last week, inbound phone calls are back to normal. We've been seeing similar number that we are used to in terms of number of incoming phone calls. So now let's get to the meat of today's discussion. We read everywhere that COVID-19 is changing the way a retailer and OEM have to approach consumer buying cycles. You know what? I don't believe it is changing anything. And let me be clear, okay? I don't say that we don't have to change or adapt, but we've been exploring for over 2 years at 360 Agency the fact that we need to engage consumers much more online and that we need to promote online sales for a digital transformation of the retail industry. So there's nothing new there. I think what the pandemic is doing right now, it is simply accelerating the pace at which this digital transformation is happening. So from both sides, consumers and the industry, what would have taken about 3 to 5 years to happen is currently happening in a matter of weeks or a couple of months. So we've been preaching that consumers are looking for different ways to engage in vehicle purchase cycle, and the retailer and OEM need to adapt. This year, it's the first time in Canada that millennials are forming largest car buyer population. They currently represent about 40% of the market right now. They are very connected consumers and very close to their environment. So it's for sure the current social distancing measure will have an impact for what probably will become the norm for many months to come, and will be affecting the way millennials are approaching their next vehicle purchase. They'll be looking at more ways to do things from home prior to selecting their dealers of choice. Having said that, I don't believe that consumers are the biggest driver for these changes. It's the industry itself. For 2 years, we've been selling our Showroom 360 V2 application to car retailers, and we've been having conversation with OEM on a regular basis. But you know what? It's only recently, in the last few weeks, that we started to have serious conversation about online sales and what it means for consumers and what it means for the retailers and the industry as a whole. Some before were very happy to look at the concept, but most were seeing it as being in the early adopting phase, and only some of the more progressive retailer was actually embracing it in order to try to get some competitive advantage, competitive edge over their market and over their competitors. But in the last 6 weeks, I think things have changed. Retailers and OEM now, everyone that we had conversation with and that we were in discussion, suddenly decided that they wanted to move into the action. We had a lot of people reaching out to us also just to inquire about what it is that we can do and what kind of programs can be put together. So we see that there's a lot of interest around that concept, and it's much more serious now than it ever been. Selling car online used to be seen as just the cherry on top. I think now it's been seen as something serious, and for some retailers and OEM, it is clearly a matter of survival. So don't get me wrong, okay? I don't think it's the end of the regular sales processes where we can actually engage with consumers, from the retailer and have a personal relationship. But the automotive industry is realizing right now at light speed what some other retail industries took years to accomplish. The retailers and the OEM are starting to realize that it's not just about the technology. In fact, the technology only represents 50% of the solution. It's also a question of marketing, merchandising, and having the right processes. Retailers and OEMs have to apply a culture change, and it's required to make sure that the use of the tools and the technology makes sense. And everyone has to make sure they make it their own. If you leave the technology alone, you'll scratch the surface of the possibilities. But if you combine it with the right marketing and the right processes, you could be surprised by the advantage that you may gain. And also, you're probably going to have some very outstanding results. There's some people that are going to make sure that they integrate the technology into the store's processes and they make it a priority. And if we do that, you know what? Rest assured, we'll all be winning. Now, it will be up to the government authority to rise and start softening the rules around contracting in order to adapt to the new reality. They've always been there to protect people like ONVIC in Ontario, AMVIC in Alberta, OPC in Quebec, been there to protect retailers and consumers with very rigid rules around the obligation of wet signature. But now, if they don't adapt to the new reality, they will be stopping the industry to evolve and potentially bounce back much quicker. So, I'm certain that the folks at CADA and the provincial associations are lobbying, and I trust that they'll be successful in helping in the process, easing the way for car retailers and OEM to be around contracting for a car purchase. So, before concluding this video, I'd like to remind our clients some key elements to consider in their upcoming strategy. First of all, having the technology to sell a car online only account for 50% of the journey. It's not like digital retailing on my website, check. Don't simply check the box and say, I do have it. Number two, make sure that you have the proper merchandising strategy in place. It's like the typical funnel. You have to make sure that you develop the proper messaging to bring or to lead the people through the steps and make sure that consumers at the end of the day are enticing to go through the steps. But most importantly, trust your online experience and your ability as a retailer or an OEM to provide an experience from end to end. Number three, make sure your team is involved and understand what you're trying to accomplish. The experience from online to in-store need to make sense not only for the consumers, but also for the staff, for your team member. So make sure they're properly trained, and make sure you can help them evolve through the new ways of interacting with car buyers. And most importantly, you have to pick up where the technology leaves you. Most consumers will not necessarily buy their entire car online and do the entire process. So you have to accompany them through the steps so online sales becomes part of in-store processes. There's no such thing as an online customer and an in-store customer. There's only one car buyer, and this car buyer wants to be accompanied in the purchasing cycle through an omni-channel approach. I think omni-channel will become the trend for the next year to come, making sure that it's a very effective experience and an immersive experience, and that there's no place where the customer feel that there's a breakdown in the process. So, in conclusion, I believe there's positive aspect to this crisis. Our industry right now has been sprinting in order to catch up on e-commerce capabilities. The industry is adapting to online sales at an incredible pace. It's generating some momentum, and I believe that this momentum will likely propel the industry maybe even further than other industries. So we're coming from being very, very conservative about e-commerce, and now I might see the auto industry becoming a worldwide leader of technologies related to consumers' engagement. I think it's been proven. If there's one industry that has the ability to reinvent itself, it's definitely the auto industry. So I have a lot of confidence in the future, and I trust that together we'll be selling a lot of cars. Thank you very much. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.